Tsering Paldron, who's come all the way from Portugal to teach us this evening, and to do a few other things in the UK, so don't feel so special. But it's still very special. Tsering's been around Buddhism and meditation since the 70s, and she's had some of the kind of greatest teachers of our age, so very fortunate for her and then for us, and to receive teachings through her. She did a 3-year retreat in 80s. Yeah, and has been teaching since then? 90s. And runs Bodhicharya Portugal as well. So if any of you think of going on the summer camp this year in Portugal, and Tsering has been organising these for many, many years, and so you're very welcome to go on that. So that's enough from me. Over to Tsering.
You want to start with
the refuge? Yes, okay.
Please do it, because I don't know if I have to do it.
Okay. So we do the refuge 3 times in the Tibetan, and then once in English, and then we'll do the, underneath that, then we say the 4 immeasurable contemplations.
Dagi jinso shire sonamji, drola penche sanje jopasho, sanje jodan sochi chananda, chachu patu dani jasuchi, dagi jinso shire sonamji, drola penche sanje jopasho. Jodan sochi chanama, chachu patu dani jasuchi, dagi jinso chibe sonamchi, drola penche sanje jopasho. Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha are to take refuge in the enlightenment, to venerate the generosity of the Buddha. May all beings have happiness and exquisiteness. May all beings be free from suffering and exquisiteness. May they never be separated from supreme joy, untouched by suffering. May they abide in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion.
According to the tradition of this evenings, we are supposed to meditate, right? I think it's a good idea, just to settle in and, we have been working all day or whatever, having fun perhaps, I hope so. And lots of thoughts and preoccupations, projects, things like this. So we let our mind relax a little bit. And so I don't know how many of you are experienced meditators, but anyway, without experience, we're just going to relax a little bit and let our mind really be here and now. We're always worried about the future, thinking about the past, and that doesn't bring us anything actually, and except stress. So remaining here and now is our time free, time off. It's sort of vacations. So let's have a little bit of vacation right now, okay? So you just, straighten your back if you can. You can put your hands on your thighs or put your right or left hand, it depends. Let's say your right hand on your left and your thumbs touching, whatever you prefer. And relax your body and relax your mind. Just think that all the worries, plans, everything that might cross your mind can wait. So we have lots of time tonight, tomorrow, to think about all those things. And for once, we have a few minutes for just relaxing. So whatever crosses our mind, we think we'll deal with that later. And we can observe our breath, our breathing, as it comes in and out. And we're not worried about if we are breathing well or if it should be like this. We just observe. No judgment, no stress. Like the movement of the sea. And of course, if thoughts come, we try to let go, not fight them, not follow them, just let go. Let them pass. Of course, because of the habit, we have to follow the thoughts. We might catch ourselves at some point following one or most probably many thoughts. And when we realize we are doing this, we try to let go. Again, not fighting, not following, just let go of that particular thought. And and this is most important, when you come back to following your breath, you just do that while relaxing. It's not a struggle. It shouldn't be a struggle, but on the contrary, a movement that gives you more relaxation. So every time you come back, you relax. I remember well, the subject is cultivating enlightened heart.
Yeah.
I quite like this subject. I mean, the title, the way you put it. I recently came across a line from, 2 lines from a Buddhist teacher, and it said something like this: we all want to be happy, which is a very common Buddhist idea. We all want to be happy, but generally we want to be happy for ourselves and for the ones we love. We want them to be happy. And I think it was a lady who was saying this, she said, the idea of this enlightened heart is a bit different. We want to be happy in order to make others happy. So we sort of want to go beyond suffering in order to be able to guide others also beyond suffering. So we still want to be happy, but not for ourselves. Because going beyond suffering in a way could be the best achievement in order to be able to guide others to that same sort of condition. And why would that be so? Because unless and until we have gone really beyond suffering, we will always be afraid, and we will always, somehow, somewhere in ourselves, be afraid of suffering. Not only we want to be happy, but I think even more than wanting to be happy, we don't want to suffer. And not wanting to suffer makes us fearful, because whenever something happens, or even if it's not happening to us, but whenever we are near someone who is suffering, we cannot but feel that person's suffering. And so either we are open, if it's someone whom we love, if it's someone to whom we are sympathetic, we will sort of embrace or at least try to be empathic and helpful with that suffering. But if it's someone that that is not so sympathetic, or if we don't feel that much connection with that person, we will probably feel rejection. And we will, block ourselves, try not to feel it, and even, if possible, we will try to, put that person as far as possible from ourselves, so that we don't feel his or her suffering. So, if we do this, then of course we won't be able to help people. We will always be afraid, and true compassion will never really come. We will never be able to experience true compassion, because we will always be afraid of suffering, and so we won't feel like getting too close of someone who is suffering, because we will feel that suffering. Sometimes even our friends, I think sometimes we can't really bear to be around someone whom we love, but who is in a very difficult situation, painful situation, like terminal diseases and things like this. Sometimes we avoid visiting a good friend, an old friend, because we can't bear. Or even a dog. If your dog is, terminally ill, you will sort of, in a sense, so that it doesn't suffer more, you will put an end to its life. But I suspect that somehow it's also because we can't bear. So it's not only for him. I'm talking about the dogs. Of course, we won't do this with human beings. But it's not only because of him or her, it's also because we can't bear it. You know? So I think that's why, if we want to cultivate the enlightened heart, we really have to be quite brave with suffering. And probably that's why Buddha started his teachings by explaining us the nature of suffering. Not the nature in the sense how it is made or something like this, but to explain that suffering is inevitable. Sorry. For us human beings, until we are in this sort of condition as we are now, most of us, there is no way we could avoid suffering. And if we understand this, that doesn't mean that we will be suffering all the time. Fortunately, that's not the case. There are moments of happiness, of course. But what he meant is that none of us really is in a position to be in a position in which he would be able to say, I will not suffering anymore ever. You know, there's always that possibility. Even something that makes us happy today might become a cause of suffering tomorrow or even this evening, just by the fact that it might finish if it's something very pleasant. Or we might not finish, but we might be afraid that it would. So anything that is surrounding us and that we can consider now as a cause of happiness might become a cause of suffering. That's why, this is one of the meditations, and we realize that there is, it's part of our human condition in this state of mind that we have. It's part of it that the suffering will be present, can always be present. So there is this liability that it's always hanging somewhere, sooner or later it will happen. And that's why, and that helps. It seems it seems quite the opposite of the Western mentality nowadays. There is a certain sense of everything will be all right in the end, happy ever after and things like this. So we sort of not expecting things to turn into difficulties or things like this, and we have come to a point. I think it was like that also in the time of the Buddha, but perhaps nowadays it's even stronger. I have come to a place where we have not only we don't want to suffer, but we have a strong aversion to suffering. The smallest thing that doesn't go the way we want will put us, So if this is like this, what happens is that we become more and more under the power of hope and fear, because we're always hoping for something to happen, something good to happen, and always fearing that it might not happen or that something bad might happen. And if we are under this sort of mixed feelings, which are stronger and stronger, the more we fear suffering and the more we want happiness, we will be always, in between those two sort of fires, and we will never have peace, and we can't really develop or cultivate the enlightened heart if we are always under this sort of dual feeling of fear and doubt and also hope and wish and desire and things like this. So, what I mean, sometimes people, when they listen to Buddhist teachings and hear about suffering, they get this impression that Buddha must be someone very gloomy, or it's not very pleasant or something like this. But it's not gloomy and it's not pessimistic. It's just realistic, but it's mostly to make us understand what is actually the reality of our situation. And by doing this, and I think that's the most important part, we come to a point by observing how it happens with us, how it happens around us. We come to a place or to a point where we don't feel like suffering is such an unnatural thing, or it's nothing really so bad. Also, it's something quite natural. It happens to everyone. And when we start feeling like that, a little less aversion, then we start becoming a little bit more brave. Brave in order for ourselves, with our own suffering, we will be able to bear it in a more sort of dignified way, and we will be less prone to feel this anguish or this fear, and also this excessive wish of happiness and things like this. So we'll get to a more sort of peaceful state where it doesn't mean you can't feel the difference between suffering and happiness, but it won't be so troublesome, you won't be caught in these sort of difficult feelings. And also, and I think that is also the important thing, you won't be feeling that way either for the suffering of others. So once you come to this idea or this understanding, perhaps this acceptance that it's part of human condition, it's part of human nature, of our state of mind to have suffering, we will accept it more easily, and we won't be, we will be more open. Otherwise, we always close ourselves. We close ourselves to our own suffering, but we also close ourselves to the suffering of others. And the result of that is that we become people very, what can I say, insensitive. But the problem with that, we might say, yes, well, that serves me well if I'm more insensitive, so I don't feel too much. And so it's a way of protecting myself. Probably when we were all young, children, we didn't know life. Bad things perhaps didn't yet happen to us. We were not wounded or, by other people's reactions or things like this. So we were more open. But then experiences in life, difficult experience, painful experiences came, and we started to sort of build protections, what we expect would protect us. So we sort of build around us different layers of protection, so we come to a point sometimes in life where we hardly feel anything, we become a bit more insensitive to painful things, that's true. But we also find ourselves more insensitive to anything. So we sort of, we have a sort of shell around ourselves. And so we don't feel others' pain, but we don't feel also the beauty of things, we become closed, we become sort of mummified, in a sense, dry and, rigid and scared, maybe. So if we want to cultivate this enlightened heart, we can't go that way. Or if we have been that way, and we are now a person with a closed heart, there has to be, in order for us to cultivate this heart, this warm heart, we have to do something. And I think that the first step comes through accepting that suffering is part of life. And then from there, it's not like something really bad. It shouldn't be like, oh, so bad, suffering is part of life. There's also good sides to suffering, you know. We all here probably wouldn't have come here today if we hadn't had certain number of sufferings in our lives. What we are today is, of course, the result of many things, also good things, love of our parents, love of our friends, and things like this. But perhaps the most challenging things that sometimes, quite often, makes us try things that we would never have tried, or be interested by things that we would never interested us if we only had good experiences. I think sometimes the bad things in life, the difficult things, the problems, the pain, that is what makes us want to go further, try something else, look deeper into ourselves and into the world. So suffering is not only bad, there are good sides to suffering, like this, when I look back to my own life, and I suppose it must be the same with you, if I put on a piece of paper all the influences that I had when I had to, for instance, have great decisions in my life, for instance, if I put side by side, the good aspects or the favorable conditions that made me change or made me go take one step or one certain decision, and I put side by side with the difficult things in life that made me take some steps or take some decisions, I find that difficult things, which are much more helpful often than the peaceful things or the pleasant things. So I think sometimes losing your job or losing a loved one or having trouble, whatever kind of trouble, even a sickness or something like this, really pulls us, to get us going, and we are really, otherwise we just let ourselves flow, isn't it? When everything goes well, we just let ourselves be, and there's no effort to make. So suffering is not something bad. It's something more dynamic, perhaps, that really makes us do something, act. And once we understand this, then we can also understand that it's not only something that happens to us, it's something that happens to everybody. And when we see this, then we feel empathetic, like I'm going through something difficult, and then I immediately think, well, this is not pleasant, it's a difficult situation, I'd rather not have to live or go through this, but I'm sure there has been hundreds of people, thousands of people in the world who have been through the same, or even worse. So, feeling this way changes the way we feel about suffering. So, most of the times, it's not the difficult things that makes us, it's not so much the difficult things that make us suffering, but the way we feel about them. You know what I mean? Reacting against the bad things that might have happened causes us much more suffering than the things themselves. So if we manage to see that all of these difficult moments or difficult things, if we manage to see them as something almost not personal, something that really happens to many people, and if not exactly the same situation, other situations happens to to other people, then suddenly things become lighter, you know, and there is more acceptance. And not only acceptance, but there is this sense of, like, you know, when there are some situations, dramatic situations in which a whole group of people is involved, you know, people tend to be very supportive of each other, because we sort of have this feeling that we are all together in this, everybody suffering the same way I am, so we start looking at each other in a very different way, in a much warmer way. You know, we can be very mean sometimes with our neighbor in times, in normal times. You know, it's so. But then if something really happens, something bad happens that touches both of us, then this sort of, this shell cracks, you know, and behind that shell there is a warm heart, you know, just waiting to be able to beat, and to give warm, to receive warm. So I think sometimes we are so closed up in our small little world, so afraid of certain things, so desireful of certain other things, that won't change much anyway, because happiness doesn't depend on all these things. It's much more capacity that we either have or not, but we can cultivate anyway. So we are so prisoners of all these struggles, these mental struggles, that, you know, we sort of close ourselves up in this bubble. It would be nice if it was a bubble, but it's a sort of very rigid and strong bubble. And when something really happens that breaks it, we can all feel that, you know, we have, perhaps even we hadn't felt it for a long time, but there is a warm heart in all of us. And this warm heart is beating, you know. And cultivating the enlightened heart is somehow being able to become more vulnerable every day without having to go through, you know, a tsunami or something like that. I remember when there was this tsunami a few years ago, how the whole world was in shock, you know, and even if we were thousands of kilometers away, thousands of miles away from the place where it happened, I think we were all shocked. We were all in shock. And suddenly it was easier to speak in someone to an unknown person in the street, you know. We would just sit in a waiting room or something, and, you know, very quickly someone would engage conversation. Say, oh, that horrible thing that happened there. No, why? Because it was so sudden, it was so dramatic that everybody had a little crack, you know, in their shell. So we have this tendency to find when everything is comfortable in our lives, which it seldom happens, but because we always want something else. But anyway, when everything is sort of comfortable, we have a tendency to feel safe. And that's one of the worst things that can happen, because safe for us means insensitive. You know, I feel safe, so I don't have to look at people, I don't have to talk with them. I feel safe. I'm in my bubble, and in my bubble it's warm and it's nice and it's, you know, it feels great inside there. And I don't even want to talk with anyone because they might trouble, you know, my little cozy bubble. So, but once there has been, you know, like really in a very certain sense, if there has been earthquake inside us, you know, and there is a little crack, then we will be much supportive, and we will want to engage conversation. Not obsessively, it's not that we absolutely want to engage conversation. But we have human beings around us. We sit with them in the plane, in the train, in the bus, in the tube, you know, and everybody has this headphones, and we are all in our phones, smartphones, and that's it. We are more and more in our bubbles. So if we keep in that way, you know, cultivating the enlightened heart is very hard. It's really difficult. So that's why, you know, I feel that one of the main obstacles to be able to, of course, in a sense, you know, the Buddhist training can be very easy and very easily dismissed. Like, for instance, the prayer we said in the beginning, may all beings be happy and have the causes of happiness. It doesn't cost a dime, does it? You know, you just sit comfortably in your living room, you cross your legs, you straighten your back, and then you put your hands together, you frown here because that means you are concentrating. And if somebody comes in, you say, oh, she's so concentrated. And then you say, may all beings be happy and have the causes of happiness. And that's it. And then I turn off the light and go to sleep and that's it. Nothing really happened. You know what I mean? We can very easily repeat these sentences and even mean them, but it's totally virtual, you know? All beings, first of all beings. What is all beings? You know, all beings is such an abstract concept. It's nothing really. So all beings be happy and have the causes of happiness. That's a very easy thing to think or to say, you know. But so the real training is not achieved like that, because unless you really feel your heart cracking when you think about all beings, but it's too abstract. You know, some friend of mine who is studying, you know, these things that they now study and one cannot really understand what it's for. But he told me there has been a study in which they tried with two different groups of subjects, and they put one group in one room, they gave everybody $10, and then they said, okay, now this is one project that we had somewhere in the world, like third world country or something like this. This is an association, or this is, you know, that, how you say this? You know, humanitarian thing, yeah. Who who makes schools for children, and you know, we are helping 300,000 children or something like this. So now you are welcome to give some of the money you received to this cause. And then they took another group of people, subjects, same thing, they gave each one of these persons $10, and they showed a picture of one little girl, and they said, this is so-and-so, they said the name of the girl, she lives in this country, she would like to be a doctor, but she can't afford it, so please now give part of the money you received for this girl to be able to go to school and to go to college and to become a doctor. And you know what? The interesting part is that the people to whom they showed the picture with the name and the girl gave 2 times more money than the ones to whom they said abstractly that they were helping 300 children, 100,000 children to go to school. Why is that? Because I think that's exactly what I was saying. It's easy to say, I wish everybody to be happy and so on, but it doesn't really touch so deeply that when one knows about someone, one person, two or more, but they have a face, they have a name, they are someone. And immediately there is a sort of connection that establishes, because it's not something abstract, it's not a number, it's a person, it has a face, it has a name, and once we look at that face, we can immediately connect. We can recognize ourselves in that person. It could be me, or it could be someone I love. So in order to do this sort of training, and that's why I suppose, Buddhist psychology is really very deep and extremely clever, if we want to. So we never start with the actual training. We use real people to create this warm feeling in ourselves. So we don't just think this is a good start. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do this prayer. That's not what I mean. But what I mean is, this is something we easily dismiss, and does not necessarily create the sort of feeling that we are aiming to. So in order to get this warm feeling, an empathetic feeling in which we immediately sort of recognize, yes, those other human beings are just like me, and just like me they don't want to suffer, and just like me they want to be happy. For that to happen, we really have to think about real people. They must have faces, names, So we start with someone that we like. If you want to jump to the, you can start with someone you don't like, but it's much more difficult. It's much more difficult. So you start by thinking on someone that you like. If you really don't like anyone, try and have a dog, perhaps. Or a cat. Or you can even start with yourself, Sometimes it's harder to love oneself than the others, so you can start wherever, it doesn't really matter. The point is, we start by imagining someone we like, and we imagine that person going through a difficult situation, whether real or imagining or from the past or whatever. We imagine that person going through a difficult situation, and we watch what happens. And quite probably, if it's someone that we really care for, something will happen inside our heart. We will feel, sometimes people, I found, sometimes it's so unbearable what we can feel if it's really someone we care for, and if that person, for instance, went through a very difficult situation or is going through a difficult situation. Sometimes it's really very hard to do this exercise, we can say, because it's so painful, and we have perhaps been avoiding that pain for a long time. But be brave, try, let yourself feel that, I have a dog, and recently she went through a surgery, and when I went to the hospital to fetch her, they had cut the fur. So it's a white dog, so the skin was completely pink, and she looked so helpless. I think it was heartbreaking to look at her. So if I did this sort of exercise, thinking of my dog, it was so painful to it could be anyone, but because for us Buddhists, a dog is a being. It's not, there is not that difference. It's not a dog is a dog and a being is and a human being is, everybody suffers. So this was it was a good experience for me, because looking at her was so painful. that you normally, when something hurts that much, you prefer not to feel it. So this sort of training is training us little by little to be brave enough to let ourselves feel and not just, dismiss it. I don't want to think about it. If we keep doing this, then it's very difficult to become a warm person because we have to be a little bit braver than that. It's a bit like, if someone throws a hot potato to you, it's just like accepting and, I'll keep it a little while before I give it to someone else, which we normally do. We try to view it. Suffering is going around for many centuries. Everybody's throwing it to someone else. And I think maybe it would be better to wait a little while, keep it a little while until it gets a bit colder, and then you can give it to someone else. So, developing or cultivating this enlightened heart, the expression is very beautiful, starts when you're really able to put face and name and then experience, let yourself experience what you feel when this person suffers. How do you feel about it? It's not to beat yourself up. That's not the idea, And if it's too painful, start with someone else, because the idea is not to make yourself suffer. Is to start warming the heart. Being able to let yourself feel your feelings and be sympathetic about it, and be sympathetic with others, So slowly we start like this, not only with suffering, with happiness also, Sometimes it's easier to feel something when you see others suffering, and more difficult to feel at least sympathetic when you see others' happiness, Sometimes you feel something, but it's more like jealousy when you see someone else happy. So it's not only with suffering, it's also with happiness, it's also with when something good happens to others, also let yourself feel that. So we start like this, and then slowly our heart becomes a little bit warmer, and we become capable of feeling sympathetic, empathic with others, but also with our own suffering. That's a good part, We become more acceptant. We have more acceptance to our own suffering, and we have a better relationship with ourselves. Sometimes this sounds strange, doesn't it? Not for us Westerners. We became in the last few years quite familiar with the expression of relationship with myself. But when I was young, I think at least in Portugal, we didn't have that concept to be in a relationship with myself, which sounds a bit crazy, But it's true. Nowadays, we sometimes have difficulties relating to ourselves, and that's only because we keep judging, and we normally do not judge only ourselves. When we judge everybody. So when we start accepting, the same happens. We accept others, but we accept ourselves also, and we start to understand that having warm feelings will be, if you start having warm feelings towards others, what happens is that you will also have warm feelings towards yourself. So you start loving yourself a little bit more and accepting yourself a little bit more. And that's the beginning of the healing, I would say. So developing this warm heart or this enlightened heart is really And as also this aspect of understanding that we are all the same. And after having struggled for many years to be different from the others, you know, we always want to be different. We find that that others or other people are not like me, in a sense. They have different opinions, they have different races, they have different colors, they have different desires, they are different. Yeah? After having struggled with that for many years, once we start this Buddhist training, we go just the opposite direction, you know, starting to see how similar we are. Of course, we might have a different color of skin or whatever, but that just details. Once it comes to the most essential things, which could be said to be wanting to be happy and not wanting to suffer, we are all the same. And also, you know, our emotions, maybe they won't be triggered by the same things, but the emotions in themselves are the same. Everybody feels jealousy. Everybody feels anger. Everybody feels attachment. We all do. It doesn't matter where we were born or, you know, we all feel these things. And also, at the same time, we all have a warm heart. It might be hidden more or less. It might be more in the surface. It might be more deep down. But we all have it, you know. And at the first opportunity, if someone smiles at us or says something nice, even in the supermarket queue or something, everybody's rushing, but then someone comes and says, "Oh, hello, how are you? It's so nice," or something is sympathetic, you know, in a certain way. Immediately there's a smile, there is a contact, you know, there's something happens, something opens. So we're all desperate for that. Not even, we are not really, we are also, but we may say we are desperate to be loved, but I think we are desperate to feel love. And if we always tend to put it in a sense that we are desperate, that someone loves us. But I think what we are desperate for is to feel love. So we don't have to wait for others to love us. We can love them and us, you know. So I think that is also part of what we could call the Bodhisattva way, is you are the one who makes the first step. So you're not expecting others to come towards you, you go towards them. And that will solve many problems. Because otherwise you may wait all your life, you know, next to the phone. Waiting for it to ring. And it might not happen, you know. But if you take the first step, why don't we want to take the first step? You know, because we are afraid of being rejected. Or, you know, if someone says, "Oh, I really didn't feel like hearing you," or something like that, we would feel bad, you know. That's, again, a way that we have to protect ourselves, you know. But if you start doing this exercise, the good part about this is that you can train yourself without anybody knowing. So nobody will know that you're starting to become vulnerable. You do that in your room. You close your windows. Nobody's seeing, so you can really be comfortable. You know? No fear that anyone will take advantage of you or something like that. You start doing this, and then you'll see. That's the interesting part. Very quickly we can see the results, because if you have done, even for 5 minutes, something that puts you into a warm mood, when you go out of your house for the beginning of the day, maybe something will happen, or maybe someone has scratched your car, I don't know, something bad happened, and you probably will lose all these good feelings that you have been cultivating for half an hour or something. It doesn't matter. You start next day, and next day, and next day, and then after a while, you won't even notice, But when something happens during your day, instead of reacting like you used to do, there would be a little thought of, well, yeah, that person wasn't very nice. But anyway, like myself, he only wants to be happy. And like myself, sometimes I just do the opposite, and I do things that don't make me happy. But it was my purpose, but I'm so sort of clumsy, I'm so confused sometimes that I do exactly the opposite, that creates exactly the opposite result. So, there's a bit more tolerance and we won't react so badly, so we won't hurt that person as much. And so, slowly a new sort of relationship starts. And very slowly, and perhaps that sometimes not that slowly, but quickly actually, things start changing, and I think it's very important to feel how exactly the same we are. So I once found a little exercise, and I find it so useful. Like you're sitting in the tube, you may even be playing with your phone, just not to, that nobody notices that you're different. But you look at someone, or not directly, for security, you look at someone, or you know that someone is sitting in front of you, and while you're looking at your phone, just to be as everybody else, you'll just think, especially if it's someone who provokes something in you, like rejection or something like that, and then you start thinking, well, just like me, that person really wants to be happy. And you let yourself stay with that for 1 or 2 seconds until it really strikes you. I'm sure that person really wants to be happy like me, in its own way. Then, once that really, you're convinced, it's absolutely sure, he really wants to be happy like me. Then you go a step further and you think, and probably, as myself, he really doesn't want to suffer. Then you wait for a while until you are absolutely sure. It's not very difficult, nobody wants to suffer, so we say, yes, definitely, I'm sure he or she doesn't want to suffer, like me. The important part is like me, because that's the thing, And then we can go further a little bit. Perhaps by that time it's Victoria Station and he already went out, but that's okay. We can continue with someone else. And you say, yes, and also, just like me, he probably often does exactly the opposite, What I mean, he makes mistakes and says things that he shouldn't have said and things like this, just like me. And you stay with that for a while. And then we can go on, and find other similarities, because we are exactly the same in this sense. And once it's good, I think it's a very good exercise. You can do it at home, in bars, wherever, watching television, or and you will come to this conclusion at some point. Not a rational conclusion, but I would say a heart conclusion. Not something really that it's not a sentence, it's a feeling, a feeling that we really are all the same. And also it sort of humbles us. Because when we say, like myself, this person has certainly committed things that he's not proud of, you humble yourself. You realize that, we all of us, we will always want to be right, isn't it? Sometimes we even prefer to be right than at peace. We will be right at any cost. So when we are able to recognize that, like the others, we are not better than the others, we are not worse than the others, we're just like all the others. We also do bad things. Not because we are a bad person, but because we are caught, in trying to And in what were we caught? In trying to be happy and trying to avoid suffering. And if we are caught in that with lots of hope and lots of fear, that's when we commit the biggest mistakes. You know, because we are afraid of suffering, because we really desperately want to be happy, and that's when we, do the worst things. Not because necessarily we mean ill, or not because necessarily we are a bad person, but because we are deluded about what can bring us happiness and what will certainly bring us suffering for us and for others. And that's exactly, we are all in the same situation. So the more we do this exercise, the more we understand that we are all in a difficult situation. So we become more sort of loving towards ourselves and towards others, and we start to be a little bit more understanding, not so ready to judge and to this is wrong and this is not like this, and but start to become more understanding, more tolerant, and this will trigger, the beginning of the process of cultivating this enlightened heart. And when we say enlightened, I think sometimes it's a big word. It's a bit frightening. I think enlightened, we can start by saying that enlightened is just being able to see things more as they are and less as we have fabricated them. So, for instance, we have really fabricated this idea that I am different from the others. I have my own opinions, I have my own things, and I'm not like you, absolutely not. And this is an idea. Once we start looking at things in a deeper way, we can see that we are all human beings. We all want to feel love, whether it's love that comes from outside, whether it's love that comes from inside, but we all want to feel love. So we're all the same. And this is a very, I think it's probably the turning point, where we stop going the way of the separation and the way of duality, the way of feeling alone and feeling miserable and feeling all these terrible things, towards a sense of openness and also humanity, closeness. And I like when Dalai Lama says whenever he meets someone, he feels like he's meeting an old friend. Can you imagine living like that? I think it's wonderful. Instead of sitting you'll sit on the plane and look at each person that comes by and saying, I hope he's not sitting there. If it was an old friend, you would say, oh, great! So happy to see you, please sit down, isn't it? So probably, I don't know if it really can do that, because probably it's surrounded by lots of people, by his retinue or something. But if he was traveling alone, he would probably be happy to just meet whoever would sit by him instead of, praying that nobody sits. But sometimes it's a question of space. So it's not entirely a question of not liking human beings. It's just the vital space in the planes is sometimes quite small when you're someone like me. So I think I said a few things. Maybe there are a few questions. Or perhaps you prefer having a short break? I don't know. What do you feel? What do you think, Cesare?
Whatever, what do you guys want? Is there any questions?
Sometimes having a break, then it tends to be long. There are no short breaks actually. But if you have questions, I'll be happy to try to my best to answer. Don't be shy. We are all the same.
It's not more of a question, it's more, I suppose, a statement. Stuff that we've talked about, maybe understand why I've gone through what I've gone through and where I've ended up. It appears to be clearer, and it does make sense.
Good. I'm very happy. I think sometimes, sometimes people tell me, and I think that I've heard people telling this to some other Buddhist teachers, that what you said is not really new. It is, how you say, well, never mind. What you said is not really new for me, but you said it so clearly. You know what I mean? And I think that is the beauty of Buddhism, is that it doesn't bring something completely different or something totally new. We feel that it's something we already know somehow, except that sometimes hearing someone else saying it, or perhaps saying it in a certain way, really helps us to see what we already know, but to know it better somehow. So and it's quite often when I speak and I look at everybody. Everybody's looking at me, but I look at everybody, and it's quite often I see people doing like this as I talk. They're doing this, and I can see they sort of recognize themselves, or they're really saying actually what they're saying is yes, that's it. I always thought it was like that, or this is great. It's a great compliment.
It's quite interesting that what you've been saying, because actually last night I discovered a friend I haven't seen for a long time. Her 20-year-old son got killed in an accident, and just one son she had, a child. And I've just been thinking about it all day, and thinking how best to be. I haven't seen her yet, but just can imagine I just keep putting myself in her position, although I have two sons, but she has one son, but we spent a lot of time together when our children were very young.
Mm-hmm.
So I just can't stop feeling like the devastation she must.
Yes.
Experiencing.
Yeah. There is this sort of things is one of the most painful. Losing a child is something we feel it's sort of against nature because it's supposed to be parents that go first. But this is an idea that we have, because reality doesn't really. In reality, there is no order. Anyone can die any moment. So children don't necessarily wait for their parents to die. But in our view of the world, and perhaps because it also doesn't happen so often, we're not expecting that, so it's even harder. But yeah, well, when we see this suffering happening to others and we can feel it as it's our own, then there is something we have to. I think when I began teaching, when you teach, I don't know if there are any teachers here, but one of the blessings of teaching is that the more you teach, the more you understand, yourself. You actually, by teaching, you start understanding more and more. So when I started, I think I couldn't really make the distinction between empathy and compassion. And I think many people can't. Not that they can't, but they have never thought about it, And I think it's important, it's a very important distinction because, for instance, if someone deals with other people suffering constantly, like nurses or, therapists or people who deal every day with the suffering of others, at some point it becomes unbearable. So either they sort of, they build all this protection, and that's when you have these old nurses that seem to be quite insensitive, or you burn out because it's just unbearable. But I have heard about in some hospital, I don't know where exactly, probably in the States, but I'm sure there's been this sort of things happening elsewhere. They gave the nurses some training in meditation on compassion, and it changed everything. They came out of burnout and they were able to cope in a very different way. So I really, when I heard that, I really questioned myself. So what's the difference? But now I think empathy is just the fact of feeling others people's suffering. But because we have such an aversion for suffering, then when we feel others suffering, we react towards that the same way we react with our own suffering, trying to push it away, feeling that it's something very bad. As for compassion, if you try to feel compassion, that's quite a different approach. You still feel others people's suffering, but you feel kindness instead of aversion. I don't know if you understand what I mean. Because we have this aversion to suffering, we create more suffering, so it becomes really unbearable. We suffer of our own reaction towards suffering. So on the contrary, if you start developing compassion, means that you sort of accepted suffering with kindness. You open yourself to it. You let yourself accept it, and you don't try to you don't try to protect yourself. You don't become rigid or tense with that. And if you manage to feel kindness towards that, then your own kindness creates a sort of positive, warm response that totally not desactivates, but at least soothes that feeling of suffering. And so you don't neither you become tense or rejecting, but you don't burn out either. So this is something perhaps you should try. Feeling, kindness towards that feeling. It's not towards your friend, it's towards the feeling itself. I don't know if I really explained myself well, because English is not really my language, but when I sort of thought about this, I found it so profound, so essential, because that's with this little thing, it's like a little key or something, it really helps not to feel this rejection of other people's suffering, but our own also. So compassion, empathy is just the capacity to feel other people's suffering. But then there is this other thing which is very important, how you react to that. What kind of response you have to that suffering. So if it's aversion, then really you try to push it away. That's when you become, Or if you can't help it, like a nurse or someone like this, then you become burnout, because you can't really cope with that much suffering all the time, every day. So it's a survival thing, you know. But if you train yourself in feeling compassion, compassion in the sense kindness, it's not pity or anything, it's just kindness, you know, being kind to that feeling, then it changes everything. And you start, you know, it's a whole other world, we could say, and there is no place for neither insensitivity nor burnout. You just manage to cope with it. And the more suffering you feel, the more you become a warm-hearted person, and the more it becomes easy to feel that kindness towards it. And it finally transforms you completely. So I think maybe nurses have a good karma to be in that situation, because whether they like it or not, they are obliged to transform themselves. Whether if you're not in that situation, and if you're not really obliged, you will probably run away, you know, when you feel. Sometimes it's like even shocking, you know, people like I have a friend in Portugal whose father, I heard once saying, you know, it didn't mean bad, but you know, it's a bit shocking that he had a friend who was ill, and he was quite old, but he was in a sort of terminal situation, and my friend's father was saying, I can't go and see him anymore because I cannot bear seeing him like this. But he never thought that maybe his friend would really like to have company, you know. But because it's so unbearable for us, we are ready to let go of our dearest friends when they are in difficult situations, because we can't bear to see their suffering. And this is quite a sort of unusual, no? It's a bit rough, I find. So if we try this, having this sort of kindness, I'm not judging, I probably have done the same sometimes. That's not what I mean. What I mean is, it is a natural reaction once we have this aversion. But if we try this kindness towards what we feel, then everything changes, and we will be able, you know, we will be able to approach people in terminal situations or whatever with this feeling of, you know, you're just like me. You're still a human being, even though might be painful to see you in that situation, but there's still dignity, and there's still, and you're still my friend. You know? Other questions or comments?
I've got a question. It's about you said about not getting, or didn't use the word attachment, but not like looking to certain things for your happiness or when everything's hunky-dory sort of thing. And also even more stories about you're more afraid of bad things happening, avoid bad things, but I get that it's better to not be afraid of bad things happening, so you will at some point, but what I don't really understand is how you make the leap to stay on the level regardless. Even though I can see the logic in what you're saying, how do you get yourself there and not react, say, you're running with an angle or something like that?
I'm not sure I got your question, I'm sorry.
I'm trying to work out how you actually do what you're saying on an emotional level, that you don't get attached to everything in your life being perfect.
Oh yes, I understand.
I can see the logic, but I just couldn't see how I can stop trying to push away like the thought of something bad happening.
Yeah, the thought of something bad happening.
Yeah, or living in fear of, or if this goes wrong, sort of in the back of your mind, or a certain situation comes up.
Well, for one thing, Ringu Tulku sometimes says that the fact that I may worry about things happening has never prevented bad things to happen. So there's a sort of practical sense there. I know it's difficult because we have this habit of being afraid that this or this might happen. But I think for me, what actually happened was once I became a little bit more relaxed about suffering, and in the sense that I understood that bad things are not necessarily destructive. It might be very helpful or things like this. I started to realize that there was a sort of confidence that came slowly, that I would be able to cope with whatever happens. I'm not sure I am, but at least I have this confidence. And by having this sort of confidence, it's not in the front, it's just sort of in the back of my mind. I stopped worrying so much. Because, and if you look backwards, for instance, how you can get that. If you look backwards and you see difficult things through which you went in your life, you can have one first thing that you immediately can say is that, yes, bad things happened to me, but I survived. I'm still here. And not only I'm still here, but perhaps I'm even a little bit a better person than I was before these things happened to me. So if this is true with what happened to me with the past, there is no reason it wouldn't be true with whatever lies ahead of me, or even for tomorrow or whatever. So slowly you start building a sort of confidence that even if bad things might happen, it won't destroy you. And you will, in the end, find a way to cope with that. And if you build slowly this sort of confidence, a certain sort of peace will slowly come. You won't be so afraid that things might disrupt the balance that you have managed to achieve in a certain point of your life. This is my experience. That is how it worked with me. But yeah, I think it's helpful looking backwards and seeing that sometimes we are facing a situation and we suddenly find ourselves having a reaction or having a resource that we had never thought possible, because we do have all these resources in ourselves. But in the ordinary life, we don't always need them. But in the situation of difficulty or danger, for instance, we discover we have lots of, even strength, even physical strength we had never thought possible. So once we look backwards and we realize that we have all these qualities and these capacities and that have served us in the past, then we can sort of relax a little bit and say, well, if I manage to come to this place today, I'm not meaning here, but I mean the place where I am today in my life, then why not be able to, why should I doubt that I can, face with other things? Maybe. I hope it helps.
That makes sense. Yeah.
That's very nice of you.
So you were saying the bit about the learning compassion. Do we do that through our practice? So through our meditation practice, that's how we would achieve that?
Yes.
So the Chenrezig type practice? Or
for instance, you can start with something like that, or you can just do shamatha meditation, and then once you have achieved a certain sort of calmness, and but naturally, when we achieve a certain calmness, a certain quality of tenderness naturally comes, isn't it? So once you achieve that, then it's easy. You start by imagining someone, and then you let yourself feel like that. It's the difficult thing about this is not elaborating. So when you imagine someone in front of you, you perhaps tend to tell yourself the story, you know, oh, poor person, and I must telephone her or something like this. So you have to be careful not to follow that, because otherwise you'll just be thinking, you know, which is not what we're trying to achieve here. So when once the feeling that you want to create is there, you sort of remain with that for a while, and then if you see yourself drifting, then you bring yourself back. Okay, but you can do it whether you do it after a shamatha meditation or by, you know, even reciting Chinese mantra. You can. But I think from that experience, my friend told me, you know, that it's important that you think of someone, not just an abstract concept, because it won't have the same power.
Yeah.
You see. I thought it was crazy somehow, you know, that you prefer to give more money to one person than to 300,000, but it's because you become sympathetic with that being that has a face and a name, you know, and otherwise 300,000 people are just no faces, it's just an abstraction, you know. It won't have the same effect. At least in the beginning, perhaps afterwards it doesn't matter anymore, but yeah. So, yeah, but also I find it's very important. Don't do it only in a meditation situation. Then in life, you know, in daily life, whenever you're sitting somewhere or something like this, if you can sort of keep it. It's like nowadays we have matches, but in the stone, how you say, when we really needed to make fire. Stone Age, right. They had to keep the yes, from one day to the next, because it would spare some time. So I think this is the idea. You should sort of keep it warm.
I'll keep the fire going, the flame going.
Yeah. So sort of keep it warm. So you should sort of practice every day, but even during the daytime, whenever you have nothing to do, or in any situation you find someone annoying, for instance, then you use that.
So do the thing that you were saying about on the tube.
Yes, just like me, you know. Yeah. I can also be grumpy. And that doesn't make me a bad person. I'm just grumpy. So others also can be, you know, and that doesn't make them a bad person. And also there's another thing very important. I think if one can make the distinction between bad actions and bad persons, you know, people are quite often not bad at all. We all have this warm heart, but they do bad things. So if one can manage to see that someone who does something wrong is not necessarily a bad person, but the action was a mistake or was not good, but the person, you know, has the potential to also do good things. So you cannot judge the person and put it into a box and say, this man is bad. You know, he did bad things, but because he was, you know, confused, afraid. I think 80% of the bad things we do is because we are afraid of something. And fear is really terrible. So the idea is that never stay too far away from that feeling. The more you manage to keep it warm, the better. And slowly, you know, you will see the way you react to other people will change. It's sort of, sometimes we try to to deal with our reactions in the surface. But this is like going, rewriting the code somehow. You go really deep down and you rewrite the code. And then spontaneously, you start, without any effort, you start reacting differently. I believe much more in this sort of transformation than, for instance, trying to not explode when you are when you are angry, because it's better than nothing, of course. It's better than shooting your neighbor, but you have to control yourself, of course. But I mean, you will sort of implode, and if you keep doing that, that can be very bad also. And you have certainly not dealt with your anger. So I think in dealing with the anger, for instance, you really have to go backwards, sort of to the root of it, the deepest you can, preventing to be annoyed, and then to be impatient, and then to be, all these steps. We think of anger as an explosion that we cannot control, but there has been many stages before explosion. But we let ourselves go through all these stages, and then, so we have to go backwards, and try to be aware when it starts, when I start to be, impatient and annoyed and so on. And also, with this sort of training, you rewrite the way you feel about others at a very deep level. And so everything will benefit from it. Okay, so I think it's more or less time to go home and have a nice sleep. Very important. Otherwise you'll wake up tomorrow grumpy. Sleeping is important. It has been really a pleasure to be here tonight, and I'm very thankful to Cesare and Bodhicharya Kent group, who are running these meetings very successfully. Every year there's more people, so it's a great success. And also thank you all for coming here tonight instead of staying home comfortably. Yes, and I hope we will perhaps meet some other time, or if not, that it has been useful somehow. We can use some of this for your own life and making it more practical, more meaningful, and also by doing that you will be helping everyone around you, whether in your profession or whether in your home or family or friends or whatever, because we are so interconnected. We can't really know, quite often we don't have any idea about the impact we have on others, especially the ones, like I was staying with, yesterday I was in Southampton staying with a friend, who is also the Bodhicharya. It's an old lady, she's now 77, she was a school teacher. And she was telling me how some time ago she just ran into a man, of course now, that had been her pupil a long time ago. And how that man, said, "Oh, Mrs. Richardson, I'm so happy to meet you. I've been thinking a lot about you and how you have been an inspiration in my life. And I'm sorry I took 40 years to tell you." So, yeah, that's it, We all have, sometimes we have friends who suddenly phoned us and said, even friends from our youth who said, one day you told me this, I can't remember, but that changed my life. Yeah, that's it. So when we become happier, we sort of spread that around us, and that is much more important than anything else, actually, because that's how we change the world. It's by changing ourselves, and I don't believe in any other change. It's not, ideology doesn't change anything. We have seen that. No? If human beings haven't changed, it doesn't matter if you're communist, if you're, or not, or socialist, or whatever. If people remain the same, if they remain egoistical, self-centered, and violent and corrupt and all this, whatever, monarchy or whatever social, political or economical system, it will always be faulty because people are faulty. But if we change, it's not necessary to go on the street with big things. If you change, in the most discreet way, nobody notices. So there won't be any struggle. You can just be who you are because nobody really notices anything until a certain point. Then after a certain point, people will start noticing and say, "Oh, what are you taking?" Or perhaps if it's in another, "What are you smoking?" Why do you feel so? Why are you all smiling? Always smiling. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Just do the dedication first?
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, it's going to go around.
Oh yeah. Yes, it's a habit. Buddhists always dedicate. So not to make it too abstract, you can think of a few people you would like to dedicate it. The idea is whatever good feeling or understanding we have here tonight, warm feeling that maybe was created here, and you sort of send or dedicate that for the sake of all beings. But as we were saying, all beings being so abstract, you can add someone or a few people or a lot of people, but with faces. So send them all these nice things.
Free from stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death.